Behind that unmoving face, I can tell you exactly what I was thinking when Lieutenant Cassell walked across the forecourt toward me. I was thinking, the fog is going to clear by 8:30, which means the light will be hard on the crowd's right side and soft on mine, which means anyone with a camera positioned at the south column is going to get a poor shot of the arch, and whoever manages the public record for this repatriation will want to know that before they assign positions to the press pool. That is what I was thinking. That is the level at which my mind was operating at 6:47 on the morning of the Veldron cortège. Not grief, not premonition. Angles of light and where the photographers should stand. 6 years on the processional gate does that to you. Cassell was a good duty officer, thorough, unhurried, the kind of man who filled out his logs before his tea went cold. He came across the forecourt with his clipboard at his side, not leading with it, which told me even before he spoke that the conversation was going to require some handling. A man leading with a clipboard is delivering an administrative fact. A man carrying one at his hip is about to ask you something he expects you to. Refuse. He stopped at the correct distance. He said, "Good morning." I gave him the courtesy back without moving anything but my eyes. "Hayne," he said, and that was already unusual. Duty officers don't use surnames at post. They use rank. The surname is a concession. It means they are about to treat you like a person rather than a position, which usually precedes something you won't like. Command wants to rotate the arch detail before the cortège arrives. They're calling it a sensitive repatriation, and they want a clean pair of eyes on the gate. Nothing against you. It's precautionary. Lieutenant Farron has the relief. I said, "What time is the cortège due at the arch?" 8:15. Maybe 8:20 if the transfer from the railway terminus runs slow. And relief would take post when. Now, he had the grace to say it without flinching. "I know you're mid-watch. There'll be a note on your record. Administrative rotation. No cause for concern." I looked at the cortège schedule he was holding. He had it angled slightly toward me, the way a man does when he intends to show you something, but doesn't want it to seem like he's handing it over. I read what I could from where I stood. The name on the primary repatriation manifest, printed in the small clean type that official documents use, so the weight of what they say doesn't register until you read it twice, was Hayne T. Corporal, Keldrath Northern Survey Detachment, returned remains. 3 years, 2 months delayed by weather and access. Next of kin notified. Thomas. I had not been notified. I do not know how long it took me to read it. Probably less time than it felt. Cassell was watching my face, and I was aware of that, and I was also aware that there was nothing on my face for him to read, except the same thing that was always there. Nothing. The discipline does not leave you because you need it to. It stays because that is what discipline is. It is not a thing you put on. It is a thing that has replaced the surface you used to wear before you learned better. "I'll hold the post," I said. Cassell waited a moment. He said, "Hayne, is there an order in writing?" He looked at his clipboard. There was not. The rotation had been a directive passed through the morning briefing. Sensible, reasonable, the kind of thing that gets nodded through because no one expects an argument. A written order takes 30 minutes and a counter-signature from the duty colonel, and Castle knew that by the time he had one in hand, the cortège would already be at the inner gate. "No written order," he said. "Then I'll hold the post," I said. He looked at me for a long moment. I want to be fair to him. He was not without instinct. I think he understood or suspected what I had read on that manifest. I think he was deciding whether to push it or let the 30 minutes go. He was a good officer. He understood that there are moments when the correct administrative action and the right thing are not the same action, and that the gap between them is where a man's character lives. He said, "I'll be in the duty room," and walked back across the forecourt. I stood at the arch and I waited for my brother. There is a particular quality to the hour before a repatriation cortège. People speak more quietly. The small unnecessary noises, a radio somewhere, a gate mechanism tested one too many times, the idle conversation of the crowd lining up along the south railing, all of it settles into a lower register, as though the event that is coming has already begun to make itself felt before it arrives. I have stood post at 4 repatriations in 6 years. I knew the feeling. I had always thought of it as a kind of respect that the day pays to the occasion without being asked. That morning I found out it is also the feeling of time becoming very specific. Every second exactly accounted for. Nothing wasted. I thought about Thomas. Not the whole of him at once. You can't hold a person all at once. It's too much. The mind reduces them to the parts it can carry. I thought about the way he'd enlisted 2 years after I did, the way he'd come to find me at the barracks with that particular expression of his, half apology and half defiance, as though he expected me to tell him he was doing it wrong. He had not been wrong. He had turned out to be a better soldier than most men who planned for it from boyhood, and I had told him so exactly once, in a letter sent to the Northern Post in the second year of his survey rotation. And he had written back a single line. "Took you long enough." That was Thomas. I thought about his hands. He'd always had good hands, steady, the kind that could hold a compass level on a moving survey sledge in a wind that would push a lighter man off his feet. I thought about the way he'd stand when he was concentrating on something, weight slightly forward, jaw set, the same posture our father had had without either of us ever being taught it. I thought about the way he laughed, which was rare and brief, and cost him something, which made it worth more than the easy laughs of men who give them freely. I thought about the last letter he'd sent, which had been matter-of-fact in the way his letters always were, logistics and weather, and a brief complaint about the rations at the Northern Post, and a single line at the end that I had read many times since, and which I will not repeat here because it was for me and not for the record. The fog thinned exactly as I had predicted. By 8 o'clock, the light was coming in hard from the southeast, and the shadows under the arch were sharp and clean. A small crowd had gathered along the south railing. Civilians, a few regimental families, 2 men from what looked like a veterans association standing with their medals on and their hats in their hands. They did not speak much. They had come to witness, and witnesses do not require conversation. At 8:11, I heard the cortège before I saw it. You always hear them first. The horses, the weight of the gun carriage on old stone, the specific sound a crowd makes when it stops talking and starts watching. Then the first outriders came around the south column, and behind them the gun carriage, and behind that the escort of 6. Northern survey colors, faded from the campaign they'd been carried through, which is a thing that means something to a man who has carried a color himself and knows what the fading costs. I did not move. My eyes were forward. My rifle was at the carry. My face was whatever my face always is, which is to say it was nothing you could read from the outside. The carriage drew level with the arch. I have tried in the years since to explain what I did next. It has not been easy. There is no regulation that covers it. It is not a movement from any manual I was trained on. I took 1 step forward, left foot, heel set cleanly, weight transferred, and I brought my right hand up to the peak of my bearskin, not in the formal salute, not at the angle the manual specifies, but at the angle my father had taught us both when we were boys, the gesture you use when you mean something more than protocol. The full extension, the slight inward turn of the wrist, the thing that says, "I see you, I am here, you are not passing by a stranger." I held it while the carriage moved under the arch and through. I held it until the last of the escort was passed and the sound of hooves on stone began to soften down the processional route toward the chapel gate. Then I brought my hand down, stepped back to position, and stood my post. Castle appeared at my left flank, not at the relief point, just near enough to be present without crowding the space. He did not say anything. I did not say anything. We stood there for a moment in the way 2 people stand, when words are not the thing required, and then he walked back to the duty room and I was alone at the arch again. I finished my watch at 1000 hours. The sergeant who relieved me asked if I needed anything. I told him I needed nothing. I went to the guardhouse and I cleaned my kit, and I sat in the quiet room at the end of the corridor, the one with the east window, and I was there for a while. I do not know how long. Long enough. The light through the window moved from one angle to another, and the guardhouse sounds went on around me. And at some point, Cassell put a cup of tea on the bench beside me and left without a word, and I drank it. A note arrived 2 days later from the regimental adjutant, a formal expression of condolence, the kind that the system produces when it discovers it has made an error. In this case, the error was that my name had been removed from the next of kin notification list 3 years prior, during a records transfer, and had never been reinstated. It was not anyone's fault, the note said. It was a clerical matter. I was invited to attend the interment, which had already been scheduled for the following Thursday at the regimental chapel. I attended. I wore my #1 dress. I stood where they put me, and I kept my hands still and my face as it always is, and I watched the color party carry the colors he had served under, and I listened to the words spoken by the regimental chaplain, which were the right words, plainly delivered, and when the interment was done, I stood at the graveside until the others had begun to leave. Afterwards, a man from the Northern Survey Detachment, a sergeant named Voss, compact, weathered, the kind of man you trust immediately, found me in the colonnade and shook my hand and told me that Thomas had been the best compass man he had ever worked with, and that there had been nothing anyone could have done when the ridge gave way, and that his brother officers had thought of him every day of the delay. He said it the way the North breeds men to say difficult things, without softening them, without drama, as though the plainness of the words was itself a form of respect for the man he described. I thanked him. He nodded and left me to the colonnade. I stood there for a while longer than I needed to. The afternoon light came in low through the chapel windows and laid itself across the stone floor, in long, pale bars, and somewhere in the upper garden a bird was going on about something with great conviction, and the whole of it was very ordinary in the way that life insists on being ordinary, even in the moments you expect it to pause. I have been asked, since, whether I regret holding the post that morning, whether I wish I had stood down and let Farron take it, whether I think it would have been easier, or better, or more appropriate, to step away from the arch and watch from the side railing with the civilians, where I could have done whatever I needed to do without the uniform's requirements around me. I have thought about this seriously, because it deserves a serious answer. The truth is that I do not regret it, not because the discipline demanded it. It didn't, or at least not straightforwardly. Castle was right that command wanted a rotation. Farron would have stood the post with full credit, and no one would have suffered for it. The honest answer is that I held the post because it was the last thing I could do for Thomas that he would have understood. Not grief, not ceremony, the thing he knew me by. I am here, I have not moved, I will not move. Whatever comes under this arch is met by someone who is steady. That is what I had for him. That is what I gave. When the cortège came through, he knew I was there. I don't mean that in any way that requires explaining or defending. I mean it the way a man means a thing he knows to be true without being able to prove it. He knew. The arch is still standing. I am still there most mornings, or somewhere like it. The fog still comes in off the Aldenmere before first light and thins by 8:30, and the light still comes hard from the southeast, and the crowds still line the south railing and hold their phones up and wonder what I'm thinking behind this face. I let them wonder. It costs nothing to be a mystery to strangers. And some things a man carries on his own, not because he has to, but because they belong to him, and to no one else, and that is exactly as it should be.